In a distant forest stood a tall, hidden tower, and within its highest room lived a girl with hair so long it pooled around her like a golden river. Few knew she existed at all. She had never once stepped beyond those stone walls. Her entire world was confined to that single circular room. A cloaked figure visited her, an old woman rumored to be a witch whose curses had wounded many. This tower belonged to her, and so by extension did the girl. The witch warned her ward constantly, painting the outside world as a place crawling with cruelty and monstrous dangers. Resting a hand on the girl's head, the witch demanded a vow. She must never wish to leave, never dream of freedom beyond these walls. And true to her word, the girl obeyed. Not once since her birth had she broken that promise. Her world remained the tower, and nothing more. Elsewhere, far from that isolated spire, a restless boy sat perched on a tree branch overlooking rolling hills, itching for adventure. His village told an old tale of a witch's tower hidden deep in the northern forest, past a thicket so thorny no one dared enter. Unlike heroes of legend, he was no prince, no knight sworn to some noble quest, just a boy who decided one day to find out if the story was true. Skilled at scaling trees and drawn to wherever curiosity led him, he pushed deeper into the wilderness, unafraid of what he might find. As if guided by something greater than coincidence, a small bird passed between two windows, one belonging to the boy's world, the other to hers. The bird landed gently on her hand, an unexpected visitor breaking the stillness of her sheltered life. Determined and undeterred by the tower's height, the boy climbed brick by brick until, finally, the two crossed paths at last. Startled by the intrusion, the girl shrank back, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Their gazes locked for the first time, both frozen in the shock of an encounter neither had expected. A name slipped from the boy's lips without thought: Rosa, as though pulled from somewhere deep in memory. Startled by her own reflection in his eyes, she stumbled backward in surprise. She lost her footing entirely, tumbling in a tangle of hair and limbs. Scrambling to explain himself, the boy apologized, insisting he'd only meant to explore, not frighten her. She demanded to know who he was. Confused by the name he'd spoken, she asked what Rosa meant. He admitted it had simply come to him the moment he saw her face. Flustered and gripping her broom tightly, the girl corrected him at once. Her name was Rapunzel, not Rosa. He clarified himself quickly, explaining that Rosa wasn't a person at all. Rosa multiflora, he said, was simply the name of a flower, and he asked if that was who she'd been searching for. Confusion crossed her face as she asked whether people ate the flower. He admitted he'd never heard such a question before, surprised that so many bloomed just outside her walls and she didn't know. Rapunzel explained her situation, bound by a promise made to Madam Witch, who warned her the world beyond was frightening and dangerous, forbidding her from ever leaving the tower. The boy's expression shifted as he considered her words, quietly reflecting that the witch claimed this restriction was for Rapunzel's own good. Noticing movement outside, he asked her to give him just a moment before ducking out of sight. Determined to prove his point, he insisted the witch wasn't entirely wrong, but she wasn't completely right either. He wanted to show her something himself. As Rapunzel peered out the window in confusion, he suddenly leapt down, startling her with his abrupt departure. Moments later, the tower door slammed open as Rapunzel rushed inside, her hair trailing behind her in a frantic scramble. Catching her breath, she sighed in relief that the stranger had left before Madam Witch could discover an intruder had been inside. The witch returned, immediately sensing something was off, and questioning what had flustered her. Rapunzel stammered an excuse, claiming a bee had frightened her into fleeing the room. Unconvinced but calm, the witch reassured her there was nothing worth a bee's attention in that room, then announced she'd be away until evening and told Rapunzel to eat something. Once alone, Rapunzel exhaled deeply, relief washing over her tense shoulders. She peeked outside her door, wondering aloud if the boy was gone, only to spot something unexpected resting nearby. Small white flowers lay before her. Puzzled, she asked if this was meant to represent her, and he replied they were white and pretty, just like her. Startled to realize he'd been listening the entire time, she yelped as he leaned casually against the window, warning her to watch for thorns. He asked if she liked the flowers, revealing he'd picked them for her. She admitted, quietly amazed, that they were beautiful and that she couldn't believe he meant they resembled her. Grinning, he confirmed it, telling her she was lovely and fair, just like the Rosa multiflora blooming outside. Something unfamiliar stirred within Rapunzel's chest, a feeling she had never once experienced in her sheltered life. A peculiar sensation lingered in her chest, one she likened to holding a handstand too long, or catching sight of shooting stars streaking across the sky. Noticing the sky darkening, the boy panicked, realizing he needed to return home before sunset or risk his uncle's anger. Worried, Rapunzel asked bluntly if he was being held captive by some wicked witch. He clarified that Madam Witch wasn't cruel at all, she simply kept him inside out of concern for his well-being. He promised to return with more things to share, and though he admitted he didn't fully understand her situation, he accepted that she couldn't leave. She confessed her wish for him to experience both the frightening and the wonderful sides of the world, comparing it to how he'd climbed the tower and in doing so found her. Warmth spread across her cheeks, a quiet blush betraying feelings she couldn't quite name. She suddenly realized she'd never asked his name. He hesitated, admitting he'd forgotten to introduce himself. Waving goodbye as he descended, he called out that he was Mikel, son of the blacksmith Rydell. From then on, Rapunzel and Mikel grew close, and he began visiting regularly, filling her days with tales from beyond the tower. His stories felt like fairy tales to her of his blacksmith father, a timid gravekeeper, and his boisterous, loud family. In return, Rapunzel stitched a Rosa multiflora onto his bag, discovering for the first time the joy that came from giving someone else a gift. That feeling, she realized, had a name: love. Night after night, she found herself gazing at the moon, eagerly anticipating his next arrival. One day, however, when Mikel returned to visit as usual, something had changed. She had preserved the flower he once gave her carefully inside a box, unaware that flowers could not last forever. Now she wept quietly over its withered petals. Startled by her tears, Mikel called out her name in concern. She confessed her sorrow stemmed from breaking her promise to Madame Witch. This loss felt like punishment. Gently he reassured her that all flowers wilt eventually, though she cried out at how unfair that seemed. Determined, he extended his hand, offering her his own boots and urging her to come with him. Without hesitation, Rapunzel climbed down from her tower window, finally stepping toward the world she had only ever imagined. Mikel warned her firmly not to let go under any circumstances as he carried her down, and she agreed without hesitation. The moment her feet touched soil, everything felt foreign: the softness of the earth, the ticklish brush of grass against her legs. For the first time in her life, Rapunzel had entered the world beyond her tower. Fear still tugged at her, pulling her toward retreat, but the warmth of his hand holding hers gave her the courage to keep moving forward. She watched him run ahead into the light, his figure glowing against the burst of sunlight breaking through the trees. Side by side, the two walked deeper into the forest, her hair trailing behind her like a river of gold amid the wild flowers. Petals drifted through beams of sunlight, framing their journey through a world blooming with roses. Sensing her lingering worry, Mikel reassured her that she needn't fear flowers wilting, promising to pick her fresh ones for as long as she remained by his side. Overwhelmed, she embraced him tightly, her hair swirling around them both as petals scattered in the wind. In that embrace, something unspoken passed between them. The two had fallen in love. Foreheads touching, Rapunzel silently wished for these joyful days to last forever. Surrounded by an endless field of blossoms, they held on to the hope of everlasting happiness, for as long as they both lived. Months passed since their first encounter, filled with quiet joys like cradling a small squirrel together, until one day, their true story was about to begin. Mikel suddenly asked if she wanted to visit his village, right then and there. Excited, she agreed immediately, eager to finally meet the people he'd spoken of so often, now that she'd grown more comfortable with the outside world. They noted the timing was perfect. Madame Witch was away for her usual few days each month, meaning they wouldn't be caught, even if they wouldn't return until nightfall. Rapunzel begged persistently until Mikel relented with a laugh, though he cautioned her to hold tight, since they'd be traveling across the treetops. Thrilled beyond words, she bounced with excitement at the thought of finally reaching the outside world she'd longed to see. Mikel chuckled quietly at her enthusiastic cheering, amused by her energy. When asked what amused him, he admitted he simply enjoyed discovering yet another new side of her. He reflected on how she'd once seemed like a timid girl prone to tears, before revealing herself as someone genuinely cheerful and open-hearted, a realization that only grew the more time they spent together. Startled by the comparison, Rapunzel worried aloud whether being called funny was meant as an insult. Mikel reassured her that the opposite was true. It was exactly what made her the girl he loved so deeply. She admitted he always managed to fling bold words at her with an easy smile, leaving her flustered, wishing the embarrassment would fade while secretly hoping the feeling could last forever. She recalled how Mikel had once taught her the word eternity, comparing it to the endless sky or the ceaseless flow of time, something that carried on forever. To her, that word had come to mean something else entirely: love itself. As they ran together through the trees, Rapunzel silently wished the happiness she felt in that moment could last for all eternity. Mikel voiced a quiet plea to the world around them, asking to remain beside her always. Cheerfully, he announced their arrival, having reached his destination at last. He turned to her with pride, formally welcoming Rapunzel to his village. Her eyes widened with nervous anticipation, unsure of what awaited her among strangers. He pointed toward a modest house nearby, asking whether she liked its peaceful, humble charm. Noticing her sudden stillness, Mikel asked if she was frightened, realizing this was her very first encounter with people outside their bond. Rapunzel admitted she'd heard so much about his uncle already, prompting Mikel to excitedly introduce her properly. But the figure that emerged was nothing she expected: a grotesque, thorn-wrapped being unlike anything human, reaching toward her. Terrified, she uttered his name in disbelief as Mikel cheerfully proceeded with introductions, oblivious to her fear, while the creature let out a guttural moan. Panic swept through her as the monstrous figure lunged closer, its distorted face filling her vision entirely. Mikel's expression shifted instantly, realizing his mistake. Without hesitation, he struck the creature down to protect her. He handed her a stick, explaining that a single whack would calm his uncle down, casually noting the man simply turned strange around unfamiliar faces. Overwhelmed by everything she'd just witnessed, Rapunzel let out a piercing scream that echoed through the quiet village night. A hand lunges forward through violent light as Rapunzel collapses among the trees, her name torn from someone's throat in alarm. Panic breaks the silence of the forest. Mikel studies her trembling reaction and realizes what he's witnessing. She's seeing the outside world for the first time after a lifetime sealed away, and the weight of that truth settles over him. Carrying her limp body through the ruins, Mikel reassures the others gathered nearby. She's not a threat, he insists. She stands with them, whatever state she's in now. Crows scatter across rooftops as twisted, root-covered figures climb into view below, their groans cutting through the quiet. Something far worse is closing in around them. Two knights stand before a dying fire deep in the woods. One asks if this marks the last of it, and his subordinate confirms nothing remains. A towering armored figure beside them expresses confidence that no trace has been left behind. The knights press forward through dense trees, aware time is running short. Orders are given to head toward the final destination and to send word ahead to His Highness. Strange growths rise above the forest canopy, bulbous shapes swaying atop long stalks. Below, rows of bodies lie motionless on the ground, their forms half buried and still. A mounted knight leads a column of soldiers through the wreckage, their advance steady and grim. A younger man among them narrows his eyes, his expression hardened by what lies ahead. A girl bursts through a tangle of thorns and vines, gasping for breath as she runs. Fear grips her face while the wild growth claws at her from every side. A voice explains why the journey must pass through the treetops. Thick thorns choke the ground surrounding her tower, leaving no safe path below. Sitting together on a branch, she marvels that no one before Mikel had ever managed to reach her. He reassures her that walking below would have torn her legs apart, and promises to guide her home safely through the trees. Later, resting among the thorns, Mikel jokes that the witch who raised her must have some other way outside, wondering aloud whether she could fly. Without warning, Mikel collapses, his body giving out beneath her as thorns rise around them. Shaken and breathless, she kneels among the vines, alone and struggling to process what has just happened. She recognizes the ruined clearing around her. It's the same flower meadow Mikel once brought her to, now buried beneath dead vines. Memory surfaces of that gentler day together, but reality intrudes as she groans in pain, dragged from the past. Tears fall as she asks why Mikel would lie to her, her voice breaking as something begins slithering nearby. Her eyes go wide, dread creeping across her face as she senses the danger closing in. Thorn vines slither violently around her, tightening their grip. Roses burst open, revealing something horrifying hidden inside their petals. Grotesque infant-like faces peer out from within the blooming roses, reaching toward her with twisted hands. Her eye trembles in horror, unable to look away from what surrounds her. She screams and flees, thorned hands grasping at her heels as she runs for her life. A cloaked figure warns her never to dream of leaving the tower again, calling the outside world full of terrible things. Weeping, she apologizes, finally believing the witch was right all along. A twisted, half-formed shape begs desperately to be saved, pleading for forgiveness through ragged breaths. Elsewhere, Mikel shouts frantically through the trees, calling out for Rapunzel and the witch who raised her. He struggles to understand why she fled in such terror, remembering the fear written across her face. Searching the thicket proves useless, there's no trace of her among the thorns. With night approaching, he decides to head home for medicine and bandages, worried she might be injured somewhere in the brush. Moving through the undergrowth, he stumbles upon a nightmarish scene. Monstrous, rooted creatures writhe where his village once stood, and horror floods his expression. Disbelief overwhelms him. Everyone from the village is gone, and moments earlier everything had seemed fine. Then he spots a familiar figure staggering through the trees and calls out to his aunt in relief. He rushes to her side, desperate for answers about what happened while he was away, grateful simply that she survived. Without warning, a mounted knight strikes her down, the blade tearing through her twisted form as Mikel screams in shock. He reaches toward her trembling remains, demanding to know why this happened, his voice cracking with disbelief. The knight's horse looms over him, and a cold voice asks what he thinks he's doing there. Mikel studies the armored stranger warily, questioning whether this man came from the kingdom. The knight asks only if he was harmed. He's warned that his safety isn't guaranteed and that he must get away from the monster immediately. Confused, Mikel questions what the knight could possibly mean by monster. Mikel insists his aunt was nothing more than an ordinary woman, family to him, someone who never caused harm. The knight Christ coldly questions whether Mikel truly believes that thing deserved to be called a person. Without hesitation, he drives his blade into her withered form again. Kroatz demands Mikel look closer, asking if this still resembles anything human as her body deteriorates before them. He remarks that she seemed ordinary at first, but calls Mikel an even greater lost cause for believing it. Kroatz raises his sword toward Mikel next, his expression unreadable as steel gleams above him. The blade comes down, slashing through fabric and flesh alike as Mikel cries out. He's sent flying backward, his body slamming hard into the earth. Soldiers report the area cleared as they gather around Kroatz. Looking down at Mikel's fallen form, he utters only 2 words, "How pitiful." Before returning to His Highness, Kroatz mentions there's still one more matter to handle. A flintlock pistol clicks into readiness in his grip. He studies Mikel with cold calculation, noting the boy might cause trouble. Better to take precautions now. The shot rings out, and Mikel's body crumples to the ground under the blast. Kroatz recalls a scream from earlier that sounded distinctly female, guessing she fled deep into the forest. He dismisses his own weapon with contempt, calling it a crude tool. Barely alive, Mikel overhears the order given to another soldier: pursue her, capture her, bring her back to the main forces. Lying broken on the ground, he wonders if this is where he dies, and whether she'll meet the same fate. Shapes move through the darkness, faint voices calling out fragments of her name as they search. A ritual begins, dark words commanding the cursed one to offer herself, her flesh, blood, and imprisoned soul. The incantation continues, promising decay and ruin, vowing that a long-held wish will soon be granted and the world left to plunder. Twisted roots coil around a withered form as the chant calls for cursed bones to be offered to the Princess of Flora, demanding rebirth as a true companion. A massive eye tears open amid the chaos, surrounded by writhing limbs bursting outward. Soldiers hesitate at the tree line, grumbling about being ordered into such an unsettling forest. They recall that whatever fled inside wasn't a monster at all, just a human girl, and question whether anyone actually witnessed her entering. One soldier voices unease, recalling that the boy Kroatz killed had looked perfectly normal too, yet called those cursed creatures his family. His companion explains that some cursed beings never change in voice or appearance, though this is his first time confirming it firsthand. Regardless, their orders remain unchanged, and they push forward to finish the job. A soldier questions what proof exists that he or his comrade aren't secretly cursed themselves, if such things can look ordinary. His comrades break into laughter, admitting it was just a joke, though unease lingers beneath the humor. Their laughter fades into tense silence, eyes locked with growing dread. Confusion spreads as they insist this area was already cleared, yet something unknown draws near from deeper in the trees. Vines lash out suddenly, ensnaring the startled soldiers as a monstrous shape emerges from the shadows. Screams erupt as a grotesque eye and gaping maw consume everything in reach, thorned limbs thrashing amid the carnage. A knight stood frozen as thorn vines burst from the wood's floor, slashing the air with unnatural speed. Amidst the chaos, a shadowy figure towered, sending waves of fear through his body. Despite his panic, he yelled a desperate warning to the unseen horror. The thick thorns rushed forward, defying his plea and ignoring all resistance. Morning light spilled across the wood's canopy. Below, disturbed soil and a trail of heavy footprints showed a recent struggle. The foliage bore fresh gashes, a sign that something or someone had passed through fiercely too. Armored knights surveyed the scene, one bent to examine the trail, while the other observed silently. Back at camp, an elder's expression turned cold at the news. The word perhaps echoed. Igniting fury in his eyes, Kroatz seized the trooper by the collar, furious over the imprecise report that had delayed their mission. His demand for accuracy was sharp, his grip unrelenting. Startled, the trooper stammered a correction, explaining the evidence belonged to a girl. Kroatz narrowed his eyes, plainly unsettled by the implication. Before the confrontation escalated, a superior officer appeared. Kroatz swiftly knelt, yet the interruption did not go unnoticed. The officer questioned his harsh behavior towards subordinates. Quick to recover, Kroatz formally reported his findings. Tracks had been discovered close by, along with a trail of blood-clear signs someone had escaped through the forest. Listening intently, the superior deduced the blood belonged to the escaping girl. His tone shifted to concern, sensing that she was hurt and vulnerable in the woods. Kroatz stood alert as his commander urged urgency in finding the girl before nightfall. The woods rustled ominously. Out of the shadows, hideous, decayed doll, like monsters charged towards the group, targeting the silver-haired figure ahead. In a flash, Kroatz jumped forward and sliced through the beast with precise strikes, neutralizing the danger. He then reported that the curse had already spread deep into the woods, suggesting the area had become perilous. The commander acknowledged the risk yet voiced relief in Kroatz's reliable presence despite the growing peril. Kroatz stated they could not allow their land and residents to fall under the curse's reach. Accepting the duty, the unit was ordered to move forward instantly. believing the girl must even now be nearby alone in the thick woods. The girl sat trembling beneath a tree, clutching her knees tightly. Memories of the witch who lifted her surface, memories filled with warnings never to leave the tower hidden deep within the forest. Now she grasped the reason. The world beyond the woods was terrifying, filled with curses and beasts, and the witch had just tried to protect her from it all. Tears welled in her eyes as she silently vowed never to disobey again. She would follow the rules, remain hidden, and never wander outside the tower. With urgency rising, she murmured a plea into the night, calling out for the witch to save her. Leaves rustled in the shadows, yet no answer came, just silence and darkness pressed in closer. Startled by approaching footsteps, Rapunzel froze where she sat. Panic spread across her face as rustling surrounded her. She peeked from behind a tree, expecting the witch, yet the voice and presence felt unfamiliar, unsettling. To her surprise, a noble-looking man emerged with troops, smiling warmly. He had eventually found her and questioned whether she was safe. Alarmed, Rapunzel flinched and backed away, unsure whether to trust the stranger. He swiftly comforted her. They were not enemies, yet came from the royal capital. Understanding her identity, the man explained they had followed her trail from the cursed settlement. Their mission was to protect her. Rapunzel listened silently, her eyes filled with both uncertainty and cautious relief. While walking through the woods, Rapunzel fell, scraping her foot on a jagged stone. A regal stranger knelt beside her, offering to treat the injury with calm confidence. Introducing himself, the man showed his identity as Guillaume von Einbach, the second prince of the Einbach royal family. His refined appearance matched the grace in his voice. Rapunzel's eyes opened wide with surprise. The stories told by Mikel weren't lies. This genuinely was the prince he spoke of. Her breath stopped, and emotions rushed behind trembling eyes. Seeing her overwhelmed, the prince gently extended his hand, concern reflected in his expression. Looking directly into her eyes, the prince hesitated, then softly stated her beauty with no hesitation. His gaze held no deception, just silent sincerity as Rapunzel froze in stunned silence. A black, armored knight rose from the trees, raising a hand with unsettling calm. His eyes focused on Rapunzel's tear-streaked face, remarking coldly on how beautiful she looked while crying. Remaining composed, Prince Guillaume stepped in front of her. He vowed protection, his voice steady. With his cape fluttering, he gently assured her that fear would not anymore dictate her future. Startled by his words, Rapunzel looked up in amazement. Guillaume offered her a gentle smile, his tone light yet confident, reinforcing his intent with no hesitation. Behind him, troops stood motionless. The prince's expression shifted, and he gave a chilling command while kneeling. Uncertainty overtook Rapunzel's gaze. Her eyes opened wide with fear and amazement, silently questioning why such a command was given so casually. With no warning, the prince seized Rapunzel's dress, pulling her close. He stated she now belonged to him, his tone void of warmth. She recoiled in panic, crying out in uncertainty. Laughter escaped the prince's lips as he mocked her fear with amusement. His twisted words painted the moment as a dream women long for being taken and loved by a prince. Rapunzel's expression froze in horror. The illusion broke entirely. As she struggled to push him back, he taunted her resistance. Troops observed without a word while the prince gripped her harder, entertained by her defiance. Urgency filled her eyes, tears streamed down as she screamed for Mikel's help, clinging to the last sliver of hope. The prince leaned in, unfazed. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she questioned about Mikel, desperate for assurance. Instead of comfort, she received a calm confirmation, followed by a chilling question about the boy from her settlement. With no hesitation, Guillaume smiled and claimed Mikel had already been killed. He gestured casually towards his knight, blaming the act on his subordinate without remorse. Wide eyes filled with horror met his indifferent explanation. He justified the killing, stating Mikel was cursed and couldn't be left alive, dismissing any guilt. As she yelled Mikel's name, his hand struck her face. He mocked her behavior, claiming that calling another man's name in such a moment lacked grace. Flat on the ground, she gazed in amazement, agony, and surprise spreading across her bruised face. Hands reached for the belt buckle with deliberate intent. Praise followed. He had seen many women towering above. He offered to make her his bride, as long as she obeyed without resistance. Confidence rushed as he leaned closer, expecting surrender. Abruptly, a sword stabbed the silence. Blood sprayed across the ground as a strike came from behind, cutting cleanly through one of the guards near Rapunzel. Chaos burst. One trooper fell with his helmet flying off. Body slumping into the dirt, puzzled shouts rang out as the attackers searched for the source of the flying blade. Black armored knight stepped forward, calm yet alert. With narrowed eyes, he identified the attacker as likely a surviving cursed one. His presence shifted the mood, forcing the prince to step back. Steel clashed with force as the black-haired knight blocked abrupt strike. Surprise spread across his face, sensing something inhuman about the attack's strength and speed. Behind them, Guillaume mocked the disruption. Rapunzel stayed motionless, observing closely. Abrupt blow landed on her side, knocking her to the ground. Agony shot through her body and she gasped, clutching her waist. Standing tall, Guillaume taunted her. His voice carried harsh amusement as he proposed injuring her other leg punishment for trying to flee. Her fear strengthened with each step he took. Just as he lifted his armament again, something intercepted mid-swing. A sword flew in from nowhere, halting his strike. Guillaume's expression twisted with surprise as he turned to Rapunzel, who stayed frozen, staring at the blade that had protected her. Guillaume barked orders to his men, demanding the unseen intruder show itself. Accusations flew, assuming the monster also sought the girl in his grasp. Her name echoed through the chaos. Rapunzel's eyes opened wide in amazement as a recognizable voice stabbed the wood's air. Hope returned in an instant. She turned towards the source and called out. Mikel stood alive before her. Joy washed over her battered face. Tears streamed as Mikel stepped closer, bleeding and worn yet standing firm. He had searched endlessly for her through threat and despair. Recognition spread across Guillaume's face, blade drawn. He confirmed the boy's identity, the very one from earlier talk, the survivor he had dismissed. The confrontation started once again. Guillaume laughed mockingly, accusing Rapunzel of being overly loyal to Mikel. He hinted at something inappropriate, aiming to provoke a reaction. Tears welled in her eyes. Rage and disgust rushed as the prince called Mikel a monster, dismissing his worth with no hesitation. Abruptly, twisted roots and thorns burst forth. Guillaume's body was stabbed through the chest in a single violent instant. Surprise froze across his face. From the explosion of thorns, a hideous figure emerged, hardened skin and vine. Like limbs pulse with shadowy energy, towering over Rapunzel like a summoned beast. Even now impaled, Guillaume could just stare as Mikel, transformed and horrific, extended a hand toward Rapunzel. His voice, despite the change, even now called her name. Uncertainty and fear clashed in her eyes as the woods echoed with a distorted cry. Troops stood guard behind a smirking nobleman who mocked the scene before him. Rapunzel, the long-haired girl, shook as she looked upon a mangled body, her hands clenched in fear. From the darkness, a nightmarish beast emerged, an orb, like core surrounded by twisted, thorned tendrils. A young man lay dying, impaled and entangled by the beast's vines. His face contorted in agony, hand clutching a bloody sword, as the life drained rapidly from his body. Amused by the tragedy, the nobleman scoffed at the monster's obsession. Even in such a state, it chased Rapunzel with steady resolve, as if bound by something deeper. Kneeling before the ruined body, Rapunzel covered her face, shaking. No words escaped her lips as sorrow overtook her. The reunion she had feared became a horrifying reality. Tears mixed with sweat as Rapunzel dropped her head, a strained smile gradually spreading across her face. Her shoulders quivered uncontrollably, eyes wide and manic. She denied the horror she had just witnessed. Rapunzel clung frantically to the belief that Mikel wasn't the beast they'd shown her. The nobleman sighed in disappointment to him. Rapunzel's breakdown had ruined the image of the beautiful girl he once admired. His interest plainly started to fade. With no hesitation, he ordered one of his knights to dispose of her. Cold authority laced his words, treating the sobbing girl as nothing more than a nuisance. Sword drawn, the dark-haired knight stepped forward. He narrowed his eyes, calling her a monster. In one quick motion, he charged, determined to end it without delay. A swift lunge brought the armored knight face to face with the horrific opponent, swords clashing fiercely. Wounded and staggering, the beast struggled to rise again. The knight, unfazed, prepared another strike with precise intent. Shadowy tendrils burst from the beast's body, twisting unnaturally out of urgency. Its form distorted under the influence of an inhuman power. Unshaken, the knight stayed composed, steadily advancing with his sword drawn. Grabbing a chunk of corrupted flesh, he dashed forward and delivered another devastating attack. The monster reeled, attempting to counter, yet each motion was anticipated and interrupted. Blood scattered across the battlefield, emotionless and focused. The knight lifted his armament one final time. Honor and form mattered little now, just the mission. With a clean, decisive slash, he brought the battle to its end. Witnesses gasped as the final blow landed. Blood and shadow tore the air, drawing silence. Abruptly, the enemy's body writhed, releasing black tendrils that stabbed the ground. Startled, the knight took a step back, recognizing the foreboding resurgence of corrupted power that should have been destroyed. The beast's severed head floated unnaturally, sprouting demonic roots, its wide, dead eye fixated on the knight, emitting a hideous aura. Though dead, its body kept going to move, driven by shadowy forces. Before he could react, A spiked tendril stabbed towards the knight's side. He turned too late, agony flashing across his face. With a strong swing, he repelled the attack, sending limbs flying. Blood stained his cheek as he regrouped. Troops and a noblewoman looked on anxiously, unsure if the nightmare had genuinely ended. Blood gushed from the knight's side as he stumbled backward, wounded by the relentless undead foe, struggling to maintain balance. The knight gripped his injury. Amazement crossed his face as the beast moved despite its decapitation. It defied all logic, a body animated beyond death. Suspicion hardened into determination. He gazed past the monster, sensing an external force at play. Somewhere close by, something or someone was sustaining the beast's existence. Eyes locked onto Rapunzel, who shook in fear. Troops surrounded her protectively, yet realization dawned. The knight's expression shifted as if confirming a grim truth about her presence. From behind, a commanding voice rang through the trees, ordering the troops to kill Rapunzel instantly. The knight stood between them, torn and bleeding, as fear overtook the battlefield. With a commanding shout, the knight accused Rapunzel of being the origin of the curse. His voice rang with urgency, ordering her execution to prevent the monster's kept-going revival. Troops hesitated, yet authority prevailed. Under pressure from their commander, they closed in on Rapunzel with drawn weapons. Surprise overtook her as the danger abruptly turned toward her. Refusing to allow further harm, the knight lifted an odd device. A pulse of energy fired from it, aimed not at Rapunzel yet at the undead abomination. Even now writhing in pain, the beast reeled, racked by the blast. The knight pressed the attack, timing a decisive strike with brutal accuracy. Rapunzel screamed, shielding herself, unsure whether she'd be the next target. One final blow landed clean, deadly, and direct. The beast's head was stabbed and severed entirely. The creature's skull cracked beneath the knight's sword, eventually shattering the horrific form. Limbs, tendrils, and heads flew apart as the force of the strike scattered the reanimated body fiercely. Blood sprayed across the battlefield. Rapunzel and the surrounding troops could just observe in horror as the remnants of the enemy twisted midair, leaving devastation in every direction. Once the chaos settled, the nobleman neared the knight. With visible concern, he questioned if the knight was unharmed, shaken by the destruction they had just witnessed together. Croixed, the nobleman attempted a smile, yet betrayed uncertainty. He acknowledged the situation was spiraling out of control. This enemy was beyond them now. Before anyone could recover, severed limbs animated again. A corrupted arm reached towards Rapunzel from behind. Despite his decapitated form, the undead boy neared Rapunzel gently. She shook in his arms, unable to look away as he murmured her name, smiling as if reunited with a friend. Startled by the abrupt retreat, the knight yelled in protest. The boy escaped into the woods with Rapunzel in his grasp. In the darkness, the boy carried Rapunzel with surprising tenderness. His grip was firm yet not harsh. Questions flooded the knight's mind. Who was this being that defied death and reason? Across the moonlit forest, he ran with inhuman speed, though frightened. Rapunzel made no scream. Her hand hesitated, yet she didn't pull away. Carried into the night sky, their silhouettes disappeared against the glowing moon, the cursed and the innocent bound by an unknown fate. A violent blast echoed through the woods, leaving Mikel gasping and disoriented. Debris clung to his bloodied face as he gripped Rapunzel tightly. The shadowy sky showed no sign of the attackers. Despite her fear, Rapunzel gazed at Mikel with urgency. Their pursuers were gone, yet she even now shook. He didn't speak, just carried her further into the trees while she questioned his silence. No reply ever came back. Mikel dashed through the brush, holding her close. Her panic grew with every step. She pleaded for a response, desperate to comprehend where they were going and why. Abruptly, he halted and gently dropped her onto the grass. Rapunzel looked up, startled, his face bruised and torn, hovered over hers as she murmured his name in amazement. Eventually, his eyes met hers. He uttered a single truth. "Mikel is my name." Recognition and relief started to replace her fear. Rapunzel reached for Mikel's hand, relieved he was even now standing. Though shaken, she maintained she was fine and shifted her concern to him. Kneeling beside him, she gently touched his shoulder. Her eyes opened wide as she saw the unnatural vines creeping across his skin and coiling around his body. Mikel removed his hand from his face, showing the damage. He acknowledged he didn't comprehend what was happening to his body, yet pushed aside his fear to reassure her. As he spoke, black fluid abruptly burst from his mouth. He attempted to smile, managing just a few words, grateful that Rapunzel was unharmed. With no warning, the corruption inside him rushed. His body exploded in a violent bloom of shadowy tendrils engulfing Rapunzel. Her eyes opened wide in horror as the twisted vines lashed out, consuming everything between them in a storm of black decay. With no warning, Mikel fell to the ground, his body limp and tangled in shadowy writhing roots. Rapunzel stumbled forward, eyes wide with surprise as she screamed his name, her voice trembling. She fell to her knees beside him, panic overtaking her composure. Frantically, she called out, begging him to answer. Her fingers hovered near his chest, uncertain if he was even now breathing. Their eyes locked. Mikel gradually opened his mouth, murmuring her name, though. His voice was weak. The sound was enough to bring her to tears. She gazed, unable to look away from his fading expression. Even now conscious, Mikel spoke again. He questioned if she was afraid of him now. His tone was silent, yet each word carried deep hurt, as if he already knew the answer he feared most. With difficulty, he explained his appearance wasn't normal. He wasn't like those who attacked them yet. Something else fully. Rapunzel shook yet forced a strained smile, her dirt-streaked face refusing to show fear. Sweat clung to her skin as she faced what lay ahead. Mikel lay broken in the grass, his body ravaged by something inhuman. He already knew there was no going back. His voice was calm as he acknowledged what he had become. Shocked, Rapunzel's eyes opened wide. Her voice cracked as she wondered whether everyone in the settlement had shared the same fate across from her. Tears fell silently down her cheeks, then Mikel met her gaze unmoving, his one remaining eye filled with agony as he struggled to speak. Rapunzel waited, silent, knowing the answer would change everything. Fingers dug into the earth beside him. The truth didn't need to be spoken anymore. So that's why it all ended this way. Laughter echoed through Mikel's mind as he recalled the days when everyone smiled beside him. That calm image had always felt real until it wasn't. Rotting bodies surrounded him now, the illusion broke apart. What he once thought were friends had never been alive. He understood the one out of place had been himself. Rapunzel stood frozen. Her breath stopped. The thought struck her, had Mikel always seen them as normal? Surprise turned to fear as realization settled. Memories surfaced that day. He had moved with no hesitation. No one else saw the danger, yet he had. She now grasped why he reacted before anyone else. His voice shook, though his body changed. His heart hadn't a decaying hand stretched forward, not with malice, yet with determination. No matter his form, he even now wished to protect her. A trembling hand outstretched his hand, its surface discolored and damaged, yet its intent sincere. Tears welled in her eyes as she listened to his plea for peace, just the two of them. Away from it all, her heart hesitated, caught between fear and longing. Abruptly, she pulled back. That fragile hope broke in an instant as his body jerked unnaturally. Voice cracked, his mouth forced out the truth: he was not any more human. The words came bitter and final, resigned to his form, his fate, his curse. Hands shook as she called out in denial. Her voice broke through his despair, insisting he wasn't a monster. In her eyes, he even now had worth. She couldn't bear to let him fade alone. Beneath the moonlight, he remembered a direction north past the woods towards another country. His final memories pieced together a purpose. Blood spilled from his mouth as he forced out broken words. If she reached that place, she might even now survive. Even with a failing body, he held onto that wish. She gripped her head, overwhelmed. Wood's light filtered through thinning trees. It wasn't far now. Urgency filled her voice as she pleaded him not to speak anymore. His gaze turned distant. Weak hands shook as he told her to go alone. Whatever lay ahead, it wasn't meant for him. Rain dropped in silence. Breath escaped his lips in one final exhale. Then he had reached his end and he embraced it. Her hands gripped his dead body. Tears streamed down her face as she called out to him. No answer followed. That moment marked the final goodbye. Mikel questioned his aunt about the world beyond the woods, his eyes filled with innocent curiosity. She smiled wearily, draping a cloth over her shoulder as she dismissed his question. Outside their cottage, sunlight filtered through the trees as Mikel listened to her warning once more. The woman's voice carried a silent fear: residents beyond the forest would never accept them. Leaning back, Mikel argued gently. He imagined other villages, kingdoms living in peace, residents not so different from them. Yet his aunt's tone hardened. Her steps faltered as something unseen murmured through the air. Fear shadowed her face, and the woods seemed to breathe with an unseen presence. A chill passed between them. Odd markings surrounded the walls, pulsing like curses carved into stone. The aunt shook before them, murmuring prayers. Mikel dropped his gaze, silently agreeing to stay though. Curiosity even now lingered in his heart. Mikel received a gentle pat on the head, his aunt's touch offering warmth and silent reassurance. The small gesture carried affection and trust, masking the unease she often hid. She smiled weakly, warning him to stay safe for her sake and for his late father's memory. Mikel listened quietly, reminded of the family he barely recalled and the promises left behind. As he gazed at his hands, thoughts of his father surfaced. The man had left long ago, disappearing beyond the wood's edge, never to return. A heavy silence filled the air. Later, Mikel awoke amid chaos, his body trembling as agony rushed through him. The world blurred, blood staining the ground. Rapunzel gripped his arm, dragging him through the dirt-strewn woods. Resolve burned in her eyes as she declined to leave him behind, carrying both hope and sorrow into the shadows ahead. She dragged Mikel's motionless body through the dirt, her hands trembling under his weight. The sight of his ruined form filled her with both horror and resolve. When his eyes gradually opened, she froze. Mikel's faint breathing confirmed what she feared: he was alive. Relief and fear clashed within her heart as she knelt beside him. He gazed upward, uncertainty clouding his broken gaze. Memories flickered as he questioned why she had stayed. Rapunzel looked down silently, unable to answer the question in his eyes. Amid the silent woods, Mikel spoke of hopelessness. He believed no one beyond the forest would ever help someone like him. His words carried the exhaustion of one already fading. Yet Rapunzel declined to yield to despair. A fragile smile crossed her face as she murmured her faith that compassion still existed somewhere beyond the wood's edge. Rapunzel recoiled in surprise as shadowy tendrils burst from the ground, lashing fiercely toward her. Panic spread through her body, yet she couldn't bring herself to run. Before her, Mikel screamed in pain, his voice twisting into rage and despair. His curse intensified, shadowy roots spreading across his body as he yelled his hatred towards himself. Tears streamed down Rapunzel's face as she reached for him. Mikel's words cut deep. He saw himself as a monster, something beyond saving, yet she declined to abandon him. Stepping forward, she embraced him tightly, ignoring the black tendrils that coiled around them both. Her arms shook, yet her determination never wavered as she held him close. Under the fading moonlight, she spoke softly. She acknowledged his curse had changed him, yet believed his heart stayed untouched. For Rapunzel, that was enough to keep holding on. Rapunzel reached towards Mikel, her eyes steady despite his horrific transformation. Beneath the corruption, she even now identified his trembling heart, a fragment of who he once was. With no hesitation, she lifted him into her arms, the vines clinging to his body dragged against the ground. Yet her steps stayed firm as she moved forward. Sweat and dirt streaked her face while she pushed through the woods. Each breath came heavy, yet her resolve never faltered. His fading weight urged her to keep going. Pausing under the open sky, she gripped him tightly, tears mixing with the soil on her hands. Mikel's faint gaze turned towards her, filled with amazement and grief. Raising her eyes, she pointed to the horizon beyond the trees. Hope flickered within her expression, as if showing him the path they could even now reach together. Steps pressed softly into the grass as Rapunzel moved forward. The air felt clearer, the once thick mist fading away entirely from their path ahead. Pausing for a moment, she looked back towards the shadowy forest they had crossed. Something about the silence unsettled her, yet a faint sense of hope started to rise. A small smile appeared as she turned to Mikel. Despite exhaustion and fear, her voice carried resolve, as if promising that safety was now within reach. She adjusted her grip on his body, continuing the slow journey through sunlight filtering between the trees. Each movement brought them closer to a world untouched by the curse. Light broke through the canopy, illuminating their path. Rapunzel took another step, dragging Mikel behind her as the woods gradually receded. Leaving just the long night fading into dawn, sunlight streamed through the trees as Rapunzel eventually reached the wood's edge. Her steps slowed, exhaustion replaced by silent relief. After unending struggle, escape from the darkness was now real. Rapunzel rose from the thick woods, carrying Mikel in her arms. Sunlight broke through the trees, marking their escape. Both fell on the grass, lungs burning after their desperate flight. The unending green stretched before them, a sight neither had seen before. Dirt covered their clothes, yet peace eventually reached their trembling bodies. Mikel gradually lifted his gaze, eyes wide at the open sky. The world beyond shimmered with unfamiliar brightness. Wonder filled his expression, understanding how small their hidden woods had been compared to this vast land. Resolve flickered in Rapunzel's tired eyes. She urged herself to continue, believing safety lay just ahead despite agony and fatigue. She declined to stop until Mikel could rest without fear. Mikel's strength waned, his body giving in to exhaustion. He murmured her name weakly before closing his eyes. Rapunzel knelt beside him, heart heavy yet resolute, vowing to protect him until morning light returned. She struggled to keep Mikel steady as he attempted to stand. His body shook, yet her resolve pushed them onward. The wood's edge towered behind them, shadows clinging like memories refusing to fade. He sensed movement close by and urged Rapunzel to stay silent. The faint rustle of leaves carried a warning. Both froze, eyes scanning the clearing as tension thickened in the air. Fear spread across her face as she understood escape was impossible in their condition. Fighting would mean certain defeat. She steadied her breath, choosing silence over reckless movement. Despite the threat, urgency overtook caution. Rapunzel lifted her voice, calling out towards the unseen presence. Hope and fear mixed within her. A figure neared from the shadows, and Rapunzel instinctively shielded Mikel. Her voice shook as she explained their flight and exhaustion. The moment hung fragile, the line between salvation and peril unseen. A cautious figure rose from behind a tree, startled by the sight of two weary strangers. Boots pressed lightly into the soil as he stepped closer. Eyes narrowing in curiosity, Rapunzel and the newcomer locked eyes, neither sure whether to trust or retreat. The stranger's basket of herbs suggested compassion. Yet Mikel's weakened state demanded urgency. The newcomer neared cautiously, observing their injuries with practiced eyes. A brief moment passed before she knelt down, pulling supplies from her pouch. Calm efficiency replaced uncertainty, and her actions spoke louder than words. Rapunzel motioned towards Mikel, insisting that he receive help. First, her voice shook with exhaustion, yet her will stayed unbroken. The healer's expression changed the instant she saw Mikel's condition. Recognition flashed across her eyes, freezing her movements. Whatever she saw in him carried a weight neither Rapunzel nor Mikel yet grasped. Surprise filled the healer's eyes as she identified the curse's mark on Mikel. Instinct drove her to draw her sword, voice trembling between fear and duty. Rapunzel froze, uncertain whether to defend or plead. Tears welled as she attempted to explain. Despite his cursed form, Mikel's heart stayed unchanged. Her voice broke under emotion, showing urgency more than defiance. The healer hesitated, eyes narrowing as doubt softened into thought. A brief silence stretched before her decision emerged, shaped by empathy rather than fear. Hesitantly, she dropped her armament and turned toward Rapunzel. Calmness replaced alarm as she instructed her to wait. Her tone, once sharp, carried a fragile understanding between strangers forced to trust. Moments later, herbs and tools were laid upon the ground. Rapunzel introduced herself and Mikel with silent gratitude. A faint smile crossed the healer's face, signaling the beginning of fragile hope amid uncertainty. The healer introduced herself as Lafina while mixing herbs with steady hands. Her movements carried silent skill born from routine. A faint scent of crushed leaves drifted through the air as she worked. Mikel observed her closely, surprised by her knowledge. Curiosity flickered across his weary face as he questioned about her craft. Lafina stayed calm, explaining little while continuing her preparation. Observation turned to realization when she noted the wood's edge. Her words hinted that she knew they came from beyond it. Rapunzel's breath stopped, showing a trace of unease under her calm exterior. A brief hope stirred as Rapunzel questioned if Lafina could heal Mikel's curse. The healer hesitated, pressing her lips together, then resumed mixing the medicine in silence. Regret softened Lafina's expression as she eventually answered. She acknowledged ignorance about curing curses yet vowed to help yet she could. Trust quietly started to form between them. Rapunzel's expression brightened when Lafina noted a way to restore Mikel's strength. Hope returned to her weary eyes after countless hours of uncertainty. For the first time, the path ahead not anymore seemed impossible. Mikel listened quietly, his body weak yet his mind alert. Relief settled in knowing their immediate safety was assured. He turned towards Lafina, voice steady despite exhaustion, and questioned her to take Rapunzel to the close-by town. Resolve replaced fear as he prepared himself for what needed to be remarked. Explaining steadily, he reasoned that his cursed state would just bring threat if he stayed. His request carried both determination and grief, a plea born from love rather than despair. His eyes glimmered as he stated Rapunzel's importance to him. Lafina met his gaze in silence, moved by his conviction. Understanding this bond went beyond mere survival. Lafina spoke gravely about the curse, her words heavy with truth. She explained that such darkness consumed not just the body yet also the heart. Even with her skill, Lafina acknowledged that a broken spirit could never be healed by medicine. Her hand shook a little over the bowl as memories of past failures flickered behind her eyes. Moments later, she stood decisively, determination hardening her tone. Declaring her intent, she chose to bring both of them along. Rapunzel's eyes opened wide, unable to hide her surprise at the abrupt decision. Acknowledging Mikel's concerns, Lafina reasoned that she too risked punishment if anyone discovered them. Her words carried both defiance and acceptance, a silent rebellion against fear and prejudice. Relief flooded Rapunzel's face as gratitude escaped her trembling lips. Lafina vowed to observe over them closely while Mikel murmured her name in silent amazement, hope eventually returning to his voice. She studied Mikel quietly, sensing humanity within his cursed form. She decided to investigate his condition further, partly out of compassion, yet also for reasons tied to her own family's burden. Inside the broken shed, Rapunzel cautiously placed Mikel on the straw while Lafina inspected the ruined walls. The silence was heavy, broken just by the wind slipping through the cracks. Determined to keep him safe, they decided to let him rest until his strength returned. Rapunzel knelt beside Mikel, worry clear on her face as his breathing weakened. She clenched her hands, refusing to give in to despair before departing. Lafina glanced towards a distant castle framed by mountains. Her eyes lingered with silent determination. Knowing their journey was far from over, the two walked through the bustling streets, blending into the crowd to avoid suspicion. A hidden ally observed from close by, unlocking a wooden door that led to safety. Inside a dimly lit room lined with bottles and herbs, Rapunzel's tense shoulders eased. Lafina followed behind, closing the door securely, prepared to attempt the healing that could save Mikel's life. Rapunzel gazed in awe at the countless herbs and odd tools laid across the table. Each object shimmered with an unfamiliar glow, showing craftsmanship she had never seen before. Her eyes caught the edge of a translucent sword, clear as frozen water. Lafina explained that the herbs came from lands beyond reach, their power unmatched. As Rapunzel reached to touch the sword, Lafina sharply cautioned her to keep her hands away. The knife's glass edge gleamed dangerously, and Lafina's tone turned serious. She cautioned it could slice flesh with frightening ease. Rapunzel flinched back, understanding how fragile her understanding of this world genuinely was. Aunt's calm returned. Lafina guided Rapunzel to sit down. She prepared medicine for Rapunzel's wounded feet, observing her unfamiliar reactions with silent concern. As the bandages settled, Lafina questioned about Rapunzel's homeland. Uncertainty crossed her face, not knowing about what country even meant. Gentle hands coiled cloth around the hurt foot, movements precise yet caring. Words ran steadily, describing kingdoms far beyond imagination, lands where countless towns and residents gathered under shared rule. Stories of old wars filled the small room, echoing through memory and time. Long ago, many territories clashed endlessly, driven by pride and survival. Ultimately, strength and leadership forged unity, shaping a single power that silenced centuries of conflict. Flamme arose from that turmoil, a realm celebrated for its noble knights and shining banners. Armor reflected hope as troops swore oaths beneath a sky washed in dawn's glow. Courage defined its ruler, a king who fought at the front lines, unshaken by wounds, loyalty. Beside him stood in human form a healer who mended both flesh and spirit. Yet tranquility never lasted. Woodland mist thickened, blocking routes between northern and southern lands. Bustling streets lined with banners welcomed travelers to Panacea, a land famed for medicine and glasscraft. Innovation thrived here, and healers walked proudly among merchants and scholars. From the window, inquisitive eyes observed a world so different from anything known before. Doctors founded this nation, shaping a place where knowledge guided every life. Even normal citizens practiced healing, blending science and faith. Lessons echoed through classrooms as teachers illustrated anatomy and technique before attentive students. Wonder filled Rapunzel's face as understanding dawned. Admiration poured out openly towards her companion, whose wisdom seemed unending. Eager to return the curiosity, Rapunzel questioned her own questions. Words stumbled gently, inquiring about family and distant memories. Lafina hesitated, a subtle tension shadowing her calm demeanor. A brief silence lingered before honesty surfaced. She acknowledged having no siblings, her voice silent yet steady. Rapunzel nodded gradually, sensing unspoken grief hidden behind that composed expression. Rapunzel sat in silence as Lafina gently questioned if she and Mikel were lovers. The question lingered in the air, pulling at memories she had attempted to suppress. Although she once believed so with all her heart, her feelings had grown uncertain. Her clenched hands betrayed the turmoil she couldn't express out loud. Mikel even now held a special place in her heart. Even now, despite everything, fear had crept in. She started to see him as someone unfamiliar, even though his kind nature hadn't changed. Tears streamed down Rapunzel's cheeks. The agony he carried, yet he even now thought of her. She couldn't forgive herself for hesitating. Lafina embraced her tightly from behind, offering wordless comfort. She acknowledged she grasped too loving someone deeply, yet being unable to show it honestly. Lafina gently placed her hands on Rapunzel's shoulders, relating to her feelings. She acknowledged she, too, had once carried such emotions and identified the agony behind beautiful tears. With a gentle gaze, Lafina brushed a strand of Rapunzel's hair and praised her eyes and skin. Her words weren't just comfort, they were truth, spoken from deep admiration and understanding. As Lafina leaned closer, Rapunzel froze in surprise. The intensity in Lafina's expression strengthened, showing something unresolved. An onlooker, not knowing about the emotional weight, entered the room with casual cheer. Breaking the tension, Lafina stepped away and apologized. She swiftly changed the subject, offering to prepare food. Rapunzel, a little flustered, answered with a bright yes, and a hopeful thought about Mikel joining them. From the window. They discussed the dangers even now looming beyond their shelter. Rapunzel spoke with hope for safety, yet Lafina's eyes reflected concern, knowing peace might be short. Lafina gently placed her hands on Rapunzel's shoulders, relating to her feelings. She acknowledged she too had once carried such emotions and identified the agony behind beautiful tears. With a gentle gaze, Lafina brushed a strand of Rapunzel's hair and praised her eyes and skin. Her words weren't just comfort, they were truth, spoken from deep admiration and understanding. As Lafina leaned closer, Rapunzel froze in surprise. The intensity in Lafina's expression strengthened, showing something unresolved. An onlooker, not knowing about the emotional weight, entered the room with casual cheer. Breaking the tension, Lafina stepped away and apologized. She swiftly changed the subject, offering to prepare food. Rapunzel, a little flustered, answered with a bright yes, and a hopeful thought about Mikel joining them. From the window, they discussed the dangers even now looming beyond their shelter. Rapunzel spoke with hope for safety, yet Lafina's eyes reflected concern, knowing peace might be short-lived. Mikel lay in the hay, coiled in a cloak, his breathing shallow. No one had come near the barn. The area stayed untouched, hidden, and silent, just as Lafina had arranged. As Lafina adjusted the blanket, she questioned if he felt cold. Mikel nodded weakly. The region's early winter crept in faster than expected, and warmth had become scarce. Despite his condition, Lafina attempted to ease the mood with casual talk. Hunger wasn't the issue, his body not anymore functioned like before. Mikel consented softly, aware of the changes. He turned away, muttering that he not anymore felt human. The cursed mark on his neck throbbed weakly. Then, with a flicker of hope, he questioned about Rapunzel. Lafina answered gently, saying Rapunzel hadn't returned for several days. Even now recovering, Mikel, relieved that she was safe, closed his eyes. As long as she was alive, that was enough for him. He voiced his gratitude, yet Lafina swiftly shut him down, insisting her actions weren't for his sake. Her voice was firm, drawing a silent acceptance from him as he turned away. Before departing, she cautioned him not to move and vowed to explain everything to Rapunzel. He consented with no hesitation. As she stepped outside, she muttered to herself, tired of lying. Back in the cabin, Rapunzel sneezed fiercely under a blanket. Her body shook from the abrupt chill, and beads of sweat gathered on her forehead. Lafina returned, taking one glance and confirming her suspicion Rapunzel had caught a cold. Standing confidently, she prepared to handle the situation without complaint. Walking through the woods all night had taken its toll. Cold wind had seeped into her bones. Coiled in the blanket, Rapunzel nodded faintly as Lafina explained why falling ill was inevitable. Lying beneath the blanket, Rapunzel remembered running through the woods. Urgency had drowned out the cold entirely. Her body ached now, yet her will stayed sharp. Pushing herself upright, she attempted to ignore the fever. There wasn't time to rest. Mikel needed her. Resolve burned through her exhaustion. Even as another sneeze escaped, Lafina knelt beside the bed, gently pressing a cloth to her face. Though she didn't explain much, she maintained that helping Mikel would demand Rapunzel's full strength. Ignoring warnings, Rapunzel pleaded for a cure. She couldn't leave Mikel alone no matter the cost. She wanted to recover swiftly, anything to reach him. Without further protest, Lafina turned to her shelf and began preparing a remedy. A strong potion was poured, her expression calm yet focused. This would buy Rapunzel the time she needed. With trembling hands, Rapunzel embraced the shadowy liquid, promising it would work swiftly. Lafina handed her the cup. She forced a polite thanks and drank with no hesitation. Bitterness hit immediately. Her entire face contorted under the overwhelming taste, muscles tensed as she struggled not to spit it out. Barely able to speak, she questioned what it was. Lafina smiled knowingly, explaining that effective medicine always tasted terrible. Rapunzel, puzzled and teary-eyed, could just groan in response. Lafina showed the truth. It was a traditional tonic made from centipedes. Hearing that just strengthened Rapunzel's horror. Even now, she clenched the cup again, muttering she had to keep going for Mikel's sake. Another full gulp followed. Yet when questioned if it could cure Mikel, Lafina shook her head. His condition required something far more specific. The curse set him apart from normal humans. Inside a silent workshop, Lafina hesitated from her work, recalling the sisters she hadn't noted in years. Shelves of glass bottles surrounded her, their contents glinting like memories she couldn't forget. Rapunzel's image returned to her mind, gentle eyes, long golden hair, and a heart untainted by envy. She recalled the way her sister cherished simple things, holding a handmade doll with pure affection. The memory tightened in her chest. Rapunzel's innocent question once echoed in her thoughts, a question about life and loss. Lafina had answered it countless times in her heart, refusing to accept the truth. Though her voice claimed her sister lived, doubt clouded her expression. Deep inside, she sensed the Rapunzel she knew had already disappeared. Rapunzel, far away and changed by time, not anymore resembled the girl Lafina loved. The warmth once shared between them existed just in memory. Rapunzel froze as Lafina spoke with a heavy voice. A comparison was drawn, one that deeply unsettled her. The resemblance between herself and Lafina's sister, once merely a stranger, now felt disturbingly real across the table. Lafina prepared a remedy in silence. She remembered how her sister dropped in love with a cursed man. The memory alone was enough to darken her gaze. Rapunzel stayed wordless, sensing the grief behind each movement. That fateful encounter had changed her sister forever. Bit by bit, warmth gave way to doubt. Compassion waned, giving way to doubt and unease. Not anymore was the curse limited to flesh alone. Gradually, it consumed hearts, those of the victim and those close by. Rapunzel, listening closely, heard Lafina whisper her name with silent concern. Turning away, Lafina confessed what weighed heavily on her. Despite everything, she was worried for Rapunzel's future, though they just met. Lafina voiced her concern plainly. She didn't want Rapunzel to end up like her sister, drawn into ruin by misguided love. Her hand clenched in frustration as she acknowledged the deep bond between Rapunzel and Mikel. If his love was sincere, then his actions should reflect a true desire for Rapunzel's happiness. Eyes locked, Lafina's tone turned solemn. Someone needed to remain near him, yet not just anyone, it had to be Rapunzel. Doubt and urgency mixed in her gaze. Abruptly, a sound from outside made both women flinch. Rapunzel hurried to the window, yet Lafina's voice cracked through the tension, warning her not to look. Panic rushed as Lafina bolted from the room. She yelled that no matter what happened, Rapunzel must not gaze outside. Whatever danger towered beyond, Lafina was determined to face it alone. The town square froze in horror as severed feet dangled from poles. Lafina arrived too late. Gasps burst from the crowd. Her eyes opened wide, unable to grasp the brutality unfolding before her. Executioners in hoods paraded the gruesome message. Shouts rang through the streets. A Shikubi Kiri had come. Villagers shook, understanding the punishment had already begun. Chaos burst as masked troops stormed the calm square, brandishing weapons and severed limbs. Civilians scattered, screaming in terror, unable to comprehend the abrupt violence that broke their routine lives. Without mercy, the attackers dragged innocent residents into the streets. One woman's desperate struggle was met with brutality, while Lafina, frozen in surprise, observed the collapse of the order she once trusted. A flamboyant figure emerged, armored and smiling grotesquely. Recognizing Lafina, he greeted her mockingly, surrounded by masked followers. The atmosphere turned colder as she understood the one behind the bloodshed now stood before her. Lafina attempted to reason with him, recalling their promise to avoid the city. Yet he dismissed her concerns with a grin, insisting circumstances had changed. For his campaign, the city's protection not anymore mattered. Drawing her sword, Lafina stepped forward. Determined to stop the slaughter, she cautioned them, one more step and she'd retaliate. The nobleman eventually relented, agreeing to halt his actions for the moment. Yet, he claimed all that had already been taken would not be returned, asserting it was their rightful share. Facing him without flinching, Lafina cautioned against further recklessness. She reminded him that just his safety was guaranteed, no one else's feigning righteousness. The man maintained his deeds serve a greater cause. His voice softened, framing the brutality as a step towards a brighter world for the kingdom and its residents. Lafina tightened her grip on the dagger, her gaze sharpened. Thinking just of protecting the one who mattered most, her determination showed no sign of breaking under his twisted logic. As the massed troops withdrew, Lafina's expression faltered. Doubt stabbed her heart. Did sincerity genuinely exist in monsters like them? She exhaled sharply, left to question the meaning of justice once more. After the enemy retreated, Lafina took charge instantly. She questioned the townspeople to gather the wounded, prioritizing those severely hurt. Her calm voice gave direction amidst the lingering chaos. Tension rose when a girl accused Lafina of cruelty. Her words struck deeply, blaming Lafina for provoking the noble and bringing this upon them. Silent agony flashed across Lafina's face. Voices of resentment grew louder. Villagers pointed fingers, calling her family cursed. They blamed her lineage for the massacre, their sorrow spilling into rage as they yelled without restraint. One father, furious and broken, called out. His daughter had been taken, and no amount of healing could undo that loss. Lafina stood quietly, unable to offer comfort he would accept, just as hostility threatened to engulf her. Another voice rang out. A man urged the crowd to listen, to give her an opportunity to speak. The moment hesitated on that plea. A young noble, Mikel, stepped forward to address the growing unrest. He acknowledged the villagers' anger yet reminded them of Lafina's status as the city's finest healer whose skills were needed now more than ever. He called for unity and cooperation, urging everyone to trust Lafina and work together. Lafina's expression stayed stern, yet a flicker of surprise crossed her eyes at his unexpected support. Meanwhile, the hideous nobleman observed from far away. He issued a silent command instructing one of his masked men to secretly observe Lafina and report back. The masked trooper leaned in, sniffing the air strangely. Something about Lafina's scent was different, unusual, nothing like her usual presence. Suspicion started to stir in the shadows. As Lafina treated a wounded woman, she sensed something hidden beneath the surface. Her hand hesitated a little. This patient wasn't just anyone. There was something rare, perhaps perilous, lying quietly within. Lafina returned home quietly. Her footsteps echoed in the calm evening as she entered. The girl inside, concerned, questioned about what had happened outside. Avoiding details, Lafina downplayed the events. She told the girl not to worry, insisting it wasn't necessary for her to know everything. Relieved, the girl smiled, happy to see Lafina safe. She offered to prepare a meal and resumed her lively demeanor, trying to ease the tense air in the room. Later that night, the girl dropped asleep peacefully. Lafina looked over her in silence, exhaustion eventually showing on her face. She turned to her silent task, mind lingering on the day's events. As she stepped outside holding a lantern, she was met with a gentle voice. Mikel stood at the door, greeting her warmly. Startled, Lafina hesitated, unsure why he had come again. Mikel apologized, blaming himself for being unable to stop the attackers despite his noble status. Lafina, yet, dismissed his guilt, stating resistance would have just led to more casualties, including him. Her tone grew colder. She accused Mikel of silently agreeing with the violence, knowing she would step in. His silence spoke volumes to her, and her words cut deeply, worried. Mikel pleaded with her to leave the town. He feared she might become a target. The attackers were growing bolder, and he could not anymore guarantee her safety. Lafina declined, abandoning the residents who saw this town as their last refuge was out of the question. She couldn't justify saving herself while leaving others behind. With a steady voice, Lafina stated her life not anymore belonged to her alone. What she carried was a curse and a responsibility. She chose to face it, not run. Lafina appreciated Mikel's support yet pushed him to act decisively. If he genuinely wanted to help, he should resist the attackers and use his authority to mobilize the troops. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted. A girl peeked out the window, her eyes wide. Lafina panicked. Mikel's presence could be misunderstood. Both flustered, they stumbled over excuses. Embarrassed, Mikel hastily explained he was just comforting a frightened neighbor. Lafina clenched her teeth in frustration while the girl observed from above, plainly misinterpreting the scene. Trying to regain control, Lafina questioned whether Mikel had genuinely come alone. He swore he had and vowed to uphold their agreement. She cautioned him to stay away from the house in the future. Her tone softened a little as she voiced concern for Mikel's reputation. With so many eyes observing, even his position could be damaged. Hesitantly, he nodded in understanding before stepping away. Mikel voiced his concern, insisting that he cared about Lafina. He urged her to rely on him if she was ever in trouble, instead of carrying everything alone. Without a word, Lafina turned and walked back inside. Mikel stayed at the doorway, observing her go in silence. The door shut gently behind her, leaving a pause in the night. Inside, Lafina found the girl wide awake, annoyed. She scolded her for not sleeping. The girl smiled sheepishly, saying she was worried about Lafina and couldn't rest. She reminded the girl she wasn't someone so weak as to need worrying over. After a firm lecture, Lafina returned to her room, preparing for what lay ahead. Outside, a masked trooper lurked in the shadows. He peered up at the window Lafina had just appeared in. A whisper escaped his lips. "Found you." Above the rooftops, a masked enforcer crouched with bulging muscles. Under moonlight, he stated Lafina's discovery. His presence confirmed the town's safety was crumbling, and the next danger had arrived. Rapunzel lies in bed as Lafina gently checks her temperature. The illness has passed, and Rapunzel shows signs of recovery, her eyes now calm and focused. Eager to leave the room, Rapunzel expresses excitement about visiting Mikel. Yet, she grows self-conscious about her messy hair and appearance. Lafina tries to reassure her, yet Rapunzel hides her face in embarrassment, unwilling to be seen like that. Despite Lafina's smile, Rapunzel securely insists she cannot go out until her hair is taken care of. Her long, golden strands are precious to her. The thought of meeting someone without grooming them feels unthinkable. When questioned how long the hair treatment will take, Rapunzel estimates it'll last until sundown. Lafina, caught off guard, reacts in amazement. She didn't expect the process to span the entire day. Faced with Rapunzel's resolve, Lafina swiftly shifts gears and begins preparations. Time is limited, and the afternoon deadline looms. As brushes and tools come out, Rapunzel's determination strengthens. She must look her best before stepping outside. While brushing her hair, Rapunzel gazes into the mirror, recalling the witch's words that forbade her from leaving the tower. Lafina watches silently, reminded of how long Rapunzel stayed confined under those strict instructions. Left with no purpose beyond caring for her hair, Rapunzel spent her days in solitude even after escaping that life. She holds no resentment. Not once does she speak bitterly of the witch who shaped her world. Lafina wonders if isolation was genuinely kinder, free from agony, heartbreak, or intense emotions. Perhaps ignorance was a shield. Yet the thought that Rapunzel might never experience love or grief stirs an unease she can't ignore. Abrupt sound breaks the reflection. Rapunzel turns towards the noise, surprised by a visitor so early. Lafina narrows her eyes and questions who could be knocking at this hour. Both caught off guard. Elsewhere, in a silent barn, a young man lies beneath a blanket of hay. It has been a week since his arrival, lying in the straw. The boy with the eye patch stirs from sleep. Thoughts of Rapunzel fill his mind as he wonders if she's safe. The silent morning abruptly breaks with the sound of creaking wood, alerting him. A stranger's footsteps echo through the old barn. The man comments on how nostalgic the place feels, surprised such a location even now exists. Hidden in the hay, the boy stays low, observing silently as the intruder draws near. Unease grips him as the man lifts the blanket, recognizing that something or someone lies beneath. The stranger crouches to investigate. He's unsure if it's a body or something else. His hand gradually reaching out. With an abrupt motion, the stranger throws back the blanket, showing the boy beneath. Surprise and fear ripple through them both. Faced with a boot pressed close, the boy glares up. Defiant yet wary, the man narrows his eyes and mutters a few words. Surprised by who he has found, the tension between them surges in the silent barn. The man burst into the wooden shack, light piercing through the broken roof. His cloak billowed as he showed a young boy lying on the hay. With a sharp voice and narrowed eyes, he stated the truth. The boy was cursed. Despite the accusation, the nobleman dropped his guard and offered assurance. He sat steadily, showing no intent to harm. Mikel, the boy with the eye patch, looked up in uncertainty. Mikel acknowledged his inability to distinguish the curse from the normal for him. Every face looked the same. Yet the man saw something rare. Mikel identified his own nature reflected in another. That alone marked him as special. Shadowy tendrils writhed from the man's chest, confirming his cursed blood. With calm intensity, he called Mikel his kin. Questions followed. Why was a cursed child like Mikel in a remote barn, so far from civilization, driven from villages? By fearful crowds, Mikel had escaped across forests beside someone he loved. The memory left him trembling badly. Wandering deep into the woods, Mikel lost pieces of himself each time. Rage consumed him until he moved like a monster, not anymore sure who he was. Now coiled in hay, he shook at the thought of losing his soul fully. Fear of becoming a true beast crept closer. The older man, seated steadily close by, acknowledged he had yet to reach that point himself, though it might come with time. With firm eyes, the man offered a warning. If anything mattered in this cursed existence, it was to not be swallowed by violent emotion. Passion could blind, consume, and leave nothing behind. Strength, he explained, must come from determination. With strong will, even the curse could become an armament. That power could protect, not destroy, the ones one loved. The key lay in mastering the force. Not denying it, Mikel gazed wide-eyed, absorbing the words, determination. He murmured. The man rose, ending their heavy talk, leaving behind a new thought, one that might eventually lead Mikel forward. The older man questioned what Mikel intended after reuniting with his companion. Though resting now, Mikel would soon face a choice beyond waiting. Mikel quietly confessed his dream, to flee far away and live peacefully with the one he loved. The knight listened in silence, recalling how he once longed for the same escape. Yet now his path diverged from such wishes. Acknowledging his strength, Mikel called him admirable. The knight yet saw it differently. His purpose was a response to weakness. He couldn't accept his fate passively, so he chose to act instead. That resistance became his mission. Mounting his horse, the knight acknowledged he couldn't offer Mikel comfort or guidance beyond this shelter. When Mikel recovered, he was free to go wherever he desired. The future belonged to him alone. With one last look, the knight smiled. Destiny might yet bring their paths together again. Mikel observed him ride off, his heart caught between gratitude and uncertainty, carrying the man's words like a silent promise. As the knight rode off into the distance, Mikel lay silently under the broken roof, observing the sky through scattered beams of light. A silent question formed in his mind: could he truly live like that man? pulling the blanket closer. Mikel murmured the names of the ones he cared for. He wished to accept himself as he was and live together with Rapunzel, somewhere far from agony and fear. Abruptly, the silence broke. Voices yelled from outside, accusing him once more of being a cursed one. Panic rushed through him as someone screamed his name, calling for him to wake up. Lafina, her expression desperate, extended his hand to calm him behind her. Another villager stood in surprise. Mikel's breath shook. She urged him to stay calm and listen before doing anything rash. A loud clatter echoed. A carriage arrived. At its center stood a girl, wounded, bound, and surrounded by masked escorts. Mikel's eyes opened wide in amazement. It was her Rapunzel. An intense crash broke the silence as masked intruders burst through the wooden door inside. Lafina and Rapunzel braced themselves while chaos towered beyond the threshold. Lafina swiftly unleashed smoke magic, blinding the attackers. Seizing the moment, she seized Rapunzel's hand and urged her towards the rear exit. Puzzled yet trusting, Rapunzel followed her through the thick haze, their hurried footsteps echoing behind. Just outside, a blonde-haired rider named Mikel arrived on horseback. He yelled to ensure Rapunzel's safety while Lafina pointed sharply, commanding her to escape with him. Tearfully, Rapunzel hesitated, yet she knew the decision was already made. Inside, their pursuers regrouped, though irritated by the setback. They took quick orders from their superior, one ready to crossbow, muttering that even a small injury would be enough to stop the girl. A deadly bolt flew across the air as Rapunzel reached for Mikel's hand. The arrow struck the ground too close. Surprise overtook both girls' faces. Lafina's scream echoed through the alley as blood marked the beginning of tragedy. A loud scream echoed across the rooftops. Rapunzel's name called out of urgency. Fear swept through the air like a storm. The moment marked a devastating shift in what should have been a simple escape. Inside a dim shelter, a wounded boy dropped his head in shame. His trembling voice showed harsh truth. Their enemies were far beyond what they could handle. His apology carried regret he couldn't conceal. Mikel and Lafina crouched near the hurt Rapunzel. Concern filled Mikel's face as he questioned about her condition. One explanation came with horror. Rapunzel might lose a leg, and even her life wasn't safe. Surprise gripped them both as the reality of the injury sank in. Anger flared within Lafina. She vowed to act instantly, her determination firm. The wounded ally yelled in frustration, unable to accept helplessness. At that moment, Lafina reached into her cloak and showed a sealed vial, an elixir perhaps, or something darker. It was a desperate gamble, yet the just path left. Lafina uncorked the vial and poured its contents onto Mikel's injury. What followed was unnatural. Thorny, writhing roots burst fiercely, crawling over his chest as he screamed. The shadowy tendrils kept going to surge from the broken vial. Lafina and Mikel stepped back, stunned by the hideous growth spiraling across the floor. It wasn't healing. It was feeding. The magic drew its strength from somewhere far more personal. Mikel, panting and wide-eyed, understood the truth. The blood powering the transformation belonged to Rapunzel. Her sacrifice, intentional or not, had become the key to his survival. Vines coiled around him, binding him tight. Moments later, the growth halted. Mikel gasped and clenched his hand. Movement had returned. He sat up gradually, testing each limb, amazement spreading across his face. The agony had receded, replaced by raw energy. Mikel confirmed the result. The elixir worked. Lafina, with no hesitation, questioned what they would do next. Mikel rose to his feet, determined. Whatever the cost, he was prepared. Their course had already been set. Lafina announced their next destination, the royal capital. Determined to retrieve Rapunzel, she declined hesitation. Mikel stood beside her, recovered yet wary. Mikel looked surprised, unsure if such a reckless decision could lead to anything yet threat. From the shadows of the castle wall, masked forces and their commander answered with contempt. Twisting roots coiled around the stronghold as they stated at the heart of the curse. Mikel voiced concern about the risk. Guarded by cursed warriors, the capital had become a fortress of death. No one approaching would be spared, and survival was not guaranteed. He urged caution with a heavy heart. Despite the warning, Lafina pressed on. She remembered the family she once lost and the helplessness that came with it. Guilt had weighed on her long enough. Then Mikel identified her determination. Though reluctant, he saw she wouldn't back down. His expression softened, and after a brief pause, he consented to stand with her. The decision had been made. They would face the capital together. Despite their decision, doubts stayed. Mikel acknowledged breaching the capital would be difficult if conflict burst. Mikel silently consented, knowing their current strength wasn't enough. A change of plan emerged. Mikel proposed returning to town temporarily, hinting he had an idea. No time was wasted. Without protest, they followed him back towards the outskirts, where something hidden awaited them. Their destination turned out to be an abandoned cathedral. Lafina noted how it had been neglected since their youth. Mikel explained it had stayed untouched for a reason and began tampering with a hidden mechanism inside the wall. A concealed path opened behind the structure, showing a shadowy underground corridor. Surprise rippled through the group. The passage led straight to the royal capital, closer than anyone had imagined. Legend showed the tunnel's origin, a secret escape route built during a past civil conflict. Known just to their noble house, it stayed undiscovered for generations. Now, it would become their entry point for the mission ahead. Mikel offered to lead the way, insisting the underground path should be safe. His voice wavered, sensing unease. Even with determination, tension lingered in the group as their choices narrowed. Lafina interrupted with a firm decision. Just she and Mikel would proceed through the tunnel. Mikel was told to stay behind and protect the town. Her tone left no room for argument. Despite the command, Mikel protested. His desire to fight alongside them stayed strong. He stepped forward, unwilling to accept exclusion. Lafina's expression hardened, yet sadness hid behind her words. Then Mikel reflected on the townspeople who now sought refuge within their walls. As heir to the ruling house, his duty was clear. Protecting those left behind was no less noble than advancing forward. Even now, doubt crept into his heart. He acknowledged his illness quietly. Though sick, he wanted to help. Lafina identified the selflessness behind his words. Mikel observed in silence. Understanding passed between them. Parting wasn't rejection, it was trust in each other's strength. Mikel embraced the responsibility with no hesitation. Mikel, wearing a calm smile, entrusted Lafina's safety to him. Resolve settled silently between them as roles were grasped without further dispute. Focus returned to the mission. Without delay, Lafina turned and gave the signal. Together with Mikel, she moved ahead into the darkness, committed to rescuing Rapunzel from the cursed capital. Mikel and Lafina rose from the underground passage, climbing the final steps towards daylight. Before them stood the towering walls of Cinderella Castle, its gates twisted in thorny vines reaching the hatch. Lafina gripped the handle tightly, preparing to open it. Mikel, even now catching his breath, questioned what might await them above. Though the tunnel had been safe, uncertainty clouded what lay beyond. Lafina answered with determination, knowing luck alone wouldn't guarantee survival now. The two stumbled into a silent courtyard behind the royal castle. Statues lined the walls, observing silently. Lafina observed their location cautiously, guessing the upper castle was their destination. Abruptly, armored guards appeared, insisting on knowing their presence. Escape was not anymore an option. Axes lifted, the guards yelled accusations. They called the intruders threats and stated them to be eliminated. Lafina and Mikel braced themselves, backs close, prepared to respond if attacked. Memories stirred in Mikel's mind, words once spoken to him. Keep your emotions under control. Act with clear purpose, with steady eyes. He called forth strength with no hesitation. Mikel launched forward, his body a blur between the guards. Blades clashed and chaos burst. Thorns shot out unnaturally from the ground, coiling through the air. One of the masked enemies hesitated, stunned by what he witnessed. His words betrayed amazement. This power resembled something once known to the royal court. Uncertainty and fear started to ripple through their ranks as realization took hold, forced back. The guard called out for reinforcements, his voice trembling. From the ground, Mikel stayed steady, clutching the source of the curse with growing control. Spurred by Lafina's voice, Mikel focused his power. Thorns rushed once more, fiercely binding the enemy. The guards struggled yet couldn't break free. Resolve burned in Mikel's single visible eye as he directed the cursed energy with absolute precision. The vines constricted tighter, lifting the masked attacker into the air. Cries of agony echoed through the courtyard. Mikel's grip didn't falter. He had embraced the curse and now wielded it as an armament. The final guard fell at their feet, thorns retreating into the cobblestone. Mikel exhaled gradually, his arm twitching from overuse of cursed power. Lafina neared, surprised at how readily he had subdued the enemy. Without wasting time, Mikel urged her to keep moving. While examining one of the downed enemies, Mikel saw something troubling. The guards had noted a wish and spoke of Rapunzel. If that name was being used for a purpose, their time was running out faster than expected. Lafina voiced her concern. Though their advance had been steady, enemy resistance was increasing. Reaching the girl in time might require fighting through more than just patrols. Each step forward risked drawing stronger forces out from hiding. Calling her name softly, Mikel's tone shifted. He looked at her not as an ally, yet someone who might soon face something worse than battle. The weight of their mission was growing heavier. Far above them, the castle tower towered. Mikel's gaze narrowed somewhere beyond those walls. The truth and threat waited. At the top of the tower, Rapunzel sat alone in a grand hall bathed in sunlight. Her long hair pooled across the floor and black liquid trickled from an injury on her leg. Abruptly, her body stiffened at the sound of footsteps. The agony in her leg was dismissed by a distant voice. Someone entered the room, mocking her injury with feigned sympathy. Despite requesting she be brought unharmed, that promise had plainly been broken. The masked noblewoman emerged, speaking with unsettling delight. At her side stood a silent man in regal attire. Rapunzel lifted her head in surprise, unsure who they were or what they intended. Their presence cast a heavy weight across the room. With practiced grace, the woman introduced herself as the ash-covered princess, speaking on behalf of the king of Panacea. Her words were elegant, yet the smile behind her mask held an unsettling sharpness. Rapunzel's voice shook as she questioned what would become of her. The masked woman just chuckled, amused by her fear, with a firm grip. The masked man pulled a cord, a mechanism grown to life. As gears rotated, sharp lights flickered across the room. Rapunzel instinctively tensed, her eyes fixed on the odd scene unfolding before her. Shelves rose from the darkness, towering high around the chamber. Inside each display case rested a pair of severed feet, clean, preserved, and labeled. Her breath stopped. Facing the spectacle, she stood frozen. Feet from countless victims had been cautiously arranged like prizes. Each one, the masked woman explained, belonged to once beautiful citizens from across the land. Horror settled deeper into Rapunzel's heart. Tears welled in her eyes. Amazement cracked her voice. Why such cruelty? Why this collection? The masked woman just smiled, calling it beautiful. No shame surfaced. No hesitation. Words from the masked man followed, cold and calculated. This act, he explained, served their ritual. Love, long obstructed by curses, would be sanctified through ceremony. Their union would surpass human boundaries. Standing beneath rows of displayed limbs, the masked man addressed the chamber. This ritual, he stated, marked the beginning of their rise as rulers over humanity. His voice rang with certainty, unshaken by the horror surrounding him. Rapunzel stayed silent, yet uncertainty spread across her face. A question lingered. How did this all connect to the witch? The man turned a little, showing he already knew what Rapunzel had failed to grasp. Surprise tore through her expression. Demanding an answer, she yelled for clarification. No response came. Instead, her demand was dismissed. Plans moved forward, indifferent to her fear. Their target, the original princess, had eventually appeared, just not as expected. Drawing his sword, he neared gradually. Agony, he remarked, was love in its purest form. Her legs were not anymore needed, yet they would be taken anyway. Eyes never wavered as he stepped forward, sword gleaming. Rapunzel panicked, pushing her chair back, falling to the floor. He moved ahead with no hesitation. Behind him, the masked woman observed with calm delight. Glass shimmered above as Rapunzel looked up in terror. A shadow passed through the stained window, casting sharp light over her trembling form. Cracks started to spread as tension mounted. Shards exploded inward as Mikel crashed through. Arm extended mid-swing. He descended with force, shielding Lafina at his side. Rapunzel's expression shifted from fear to stunned relief as their arrival broke the moment of execution. Mikel crashed through the window just in time, shielding Lafina from the enemy's assault. Broke glass scattered as he landed, holding her tightly. Once inside, Lafina coiled her arms around him. Stunned by relief, tears ran as she understood. He was even now alive. The reunion silenced the chaos, if just briefly, as another figure observed from the shadows. In the throne room, a noblewoman with a mask greeted them with unsettling poise. Her identity was unmistakable to Lafina. It was her sister, now calling herself Cinderella, not anymore willing to be addressed by her former name. Cinderella coldly ordered Lafina to leave, claiming she didn't belong in such a place. Guards were summoned to escort her out, yet Lafina stood firm, refusing to be dismissed so readily. Lafina stated she came to end things herself. She accused Cinderella of falling to the curse, letting it poison her heart. Agony, she argued, wasn't love, and she would not anymore let it define their bond. She confronted the masked woman with sharp words, questioning if she had simply found a new plaything. Mikel instinctively shielded her, bracing for conflict. The tension rushed, and Lafina's glare hardened. Before tempers escalated further, Cinderella lifted her hand to halt the quarrel. Her tone stayed elegant, yet her eyes tightened behind the mask. The cold authority in her voice silenced the room immediately. A blond man stepped forward, smirking as he assessed the situation. Steadily, he instructed Cinderella's attendant to step back, vowing to protect her himself. She answered with a haunting smile, calling him her king. Addressing Mikel directly, the man voiced surprise at their reunion. He remembered their last encounter and mused that fate had brought them back together far sooner than expected. His presence changed the air. The man's gaze dropped on Mikel and Lafina. He confirmed Mikel had been chosen as her royal companion, a title with deep significance. Mikel looked puzzled, unsure what royal staffs genuinely meant for him. The blond man formally addressed Mikel, offering a ritualized challenge. Drawing his sword, he stated a duel, the trial of royal staff. His tone stayed calm, yet the tension in the room shifted immediately. Stunned, Mikel repeated the term aloud. Though the name sounded grand, he swiftly understood it mattered little more than a fight to the death. Masked by ceremonial words, the blade before him gleamed with grim finality. Locking eyes with his opponent, Mikel listened as the man claimed it was a battle for love. He maintained there had never been a choice. This confrontation was inevitable. Mikel's jaw tightened with restrained anger. Quietly, Mikel confessed he didn't comprehend their intentions. Politics or noble schemes held no meaning for him. All he cared about was Rapunzel's happiness. Lafina observed silently, standing behind him in support, resolute. Mikel gripped his blade. If protecting Rapunzel meant fighting, then he would not hesitate. He would destroy anything that threatened her, even if it meant crossing blades with those who claimed noble cause. Mikel gripped his armament securely, resolve etched across his back. No hesitation lingered as he prepared himself. A silent determination guided him. Anchored by a purpose he declined to abandon, he rushed forward, raising his sword with unshakable focus. Protecting Rapunzel wasn't just duty, it was everything. His one remaining eye locked forward, cutting through fear. Even scars didn't deter him. They reminded him why he stood. Across from him, a noble-looking man adjusted his collar with calm confidence. No fear, no surprise, just readiness. The smile he wore masked something perilous. Facing Mikel, he welcomed the challenge without flinching. Charging head on, Mikel unleashed his full strength. Metal clashed as his sword extended towards his enemy. His heart roared louder than the strike. Yet the man stood even now, arms crossed, gaze steady. Arrogance or certainty, Mikel couldn't tell. That calm voice stabbed the tension. The man claimed their love held no place for Mikel. Eyes tightened with cold judgment, he dismissed Mikel's determination as futile. There would be no mercy shown. Mikel's blade strike was stopped mid-air by a brutal kick. The enemy's swift counter sent a shockwave through the floor. Stunned, Mikel barely reacted before shadows burst across his vision. A blast followed, sharp and unexpected. Thrown backward, Mikel landed hard, clutching his armament. Agony flared in his arms, yet he didn't let go. Gritting his teeth, he reached for a device, his last resort, muscles tensed as he flung it into motion. Descending rapidly, the nobleman showed no hesitation. He moved with practiced precision, eyes locked on Mikel's opening. Despite the distance, his timing was perfect. Mikel barely looked up before the strike was already underway. A devastating blow crashed into his chest, sending both fighters flying across the chamber. Gasps burst from the onlookers. Mikel's eye widened as he struggled to regain his footing. Yet the enemy wasn't finished yet. Crashing into the floor, Mikel's head was sent flying. Literally, black cords rose from his severed neck, twitching unnaturally across the room. His opponent neared, steadily intrigued. Black thorns pulsed from within Mikel's body, reacting to pressure and fear. He gazed ahead, sweat rolling down as the curse inside him stirred fiercely. The human side resisted, struggling to suppress what lay beneath. From across the space, his opponent observed with harsh certainty. Spiked tendrils twisted behind him, laced with power and menace. He stated their nature as monsters, urging Mikel to abandon restraint and embrace his hatred. Thorn roots burst outward, forming a spiraling cage that surrounded Mikel. Cracks echoed as the floor shook beneath the curse's growth. Helpless, he crouched in the center, trapped between fear and awakening, standing within a writhing coil of horrific bone and flesh. The enemy extended a hand. A horrific beast charged forward with terrifying speed, overwhelming Mikel with its sheer force. He leapt back, yet the curse binding his legs weakened his escape. The ground shook beneath the beast's advance, its claws gleaming with bloodlust. Across from him stood a pale-haired man, calm and composed, observing the chaos with narrowed eyes. He confirmed what he suspected. Mikel was no normal boy. Close by, Rapunzel and Lafina observed in fear as Mikel struggled to remain upright, his chest heaving and vision swimming. With no warning, a spasm seized him. Mikel bent forward fiercely, blood spraying from his mouth in an abrupt burst. Agony racked his body, and his muscles tensed as he struggled to remain conscious. Staggering, he gripped his chest. Black blood dripped from his lips onto his trembling fingers behind him. Rapunzel called his name in panic, her voice cracking with fear as Lafina held her back. The white-haired man gave a grim verdict. Mikel had reached his limit. Despite his strength, his body was failing fast. Shadowy tendrils rushed from within Mikel's body, coiling around him as the curse overtook his control. His single eye widened, blood running from his mouth as he struggled to hold onto his will. Observing from far away, the white-haired man stayed unmoved. He noted the curse beginning to consume Mikel and voiced his disappointment. The words he spoke cut deep, questioning whether Mikel's determination was ever strong to begin with. With steady gaze, the man stated that no curse would ever control him. Power, he claimed, could be trained and subdued to him. Curses were merely tools to master, not burdens to bear. Then he lifted his arm confidently, summoning capsules that floated around him inside. Dismembered feet preserved in glass shimmered unnaturally. These, he claimed, were the embodiment of a twisted kind of love, proof of what they had overcome. Lafina looked up in horror. Recognition struck her immediately. One of the feet belonged to her own wet nurse. The man extended his hands towards the suspended feet, naming each one. A brother, another sibling, a servant girl who once showed him compassion. He remembered them all without emotion. Across the room, Lafina observed in horror as the scene unfolded. The man admired the beauty of the preserved feet, comparing them to flawless porcelain. She clenched her fists, calling him insane, rejecting the idea that this display could ever be justified. Unfazed, the man spread his arms and stated his ambition. If Lafina rejected his ideals, then so be it. He would continue seeking power regardless of cost. Around him, cursed tendrils slithered from the ground, twisting upward like serpents responding to their master's call. Elsewhere, a masked queen observed solemnly. She sought strength that bowed to nothing, not for dominance. In a distant memory, a tale began. A one-legged prince was born into a royal family that quietly abandoned him. Far from the palace, the forgotten child lived alone, detached from the world that cast him aside. Despite exile and rejection, the prince lived with compassion. He extended his hand to everyone, offering warmth where none was owed. Among the outcasts he found belonging, and they, in turn, cherished his presence. One day, an opportunity encounter changed his path. A young girl sat alone in the grass, her gaze filled with silent grief. He neared, not as royalty yet as someone who grasped agony. Her left leg was missing. Just like his, townspeople and even her family shunned her existence. She was mocked, beaten, and cast aside without mercy, trapped in isolation and sorrow. Instead of pity, he offered his hand. Their hearts drew together, as if fate itself demanded it. From that moment, he resolved to build a world where she could live untouched by cruelty or fear. No matter the cost, sacrifice, agony, or loss, he would carry the burden. Their union became a decision, not just an emotion. To them, this suffering was not tragedy, yet purpose, and they embraced it as destiny. Behind the mask, emotion flickered in the queen's wide eyes. What unfolded felt too precise, like a scene written by another hand, too unreal, too perfect in its cruelty. A surge of horror crossed Lafina's face. Tendrils coiled around the dismembered feet, pulling them into a growing mass. Each limb disappeared into the writhing nest of flesh and roots, absorbed like fuel. With every foot consumed, the essence of its former owner seeped into the core. Guilt, pain, grief, all ran into the being as if inherited. The ritual became a vessel, collecting the anguish of those sacrificed. Screaming faces appeared, suspended in anguish. The process mirrored childbirth, violent, raw, inevitable. Through their agony, a twisted kind of love took form, binding the ritual together. Every echo of pain pushed the transformation onward. A hideous beast emerged, armored and deformed. Through its armored frame, a human face gazed out, distorted yet recognizable. Writhing limbs extended from its form, each one even now coiled in cursed tendrils, still bearing the stolen feet. From behind, Mikel confronted the hideous form head on. The beast writhed, dozens of limbs wriggling, each one built from the remnants of others. Its tail arced upward, prepared to strike with force. Inside its armored body, a voice rang with a disturbing calm. It demanded Mikel's agony as tribute, offering a new world in return. Inhuman arms rushed towards him, twisted hands reaching to take everything. With no hesitation, Mikel leapt into the air, sword in hand. The monster charged beneath him, crashing forward. He descended sharply, targeting the armored body, while screams of alarm rang out behind him. Steel met glass, Mikel's blade drove through the shell, fracturing it with explosive force. Shards scattered across the floor. His eyes stayed locked on the being's hidden face, now exposed and glaring back. Blood trailed behind his strike. He clung to the beast's back, refusing to fall. From far away, Lafina and Rapunzel observed in terror. One held her breath, the other gripped her chest. Blood burst from his abdomen as his body slammed into the floor. Muscles failed, breath stopped, vision blurred. Energy stumbled away while agony rushed deeper. Above, clouds drifted, not knowing about his fall. Mikel lay motionless, his chest torn open by a horrific blow, Rapunzel extended his hand in horror. Helpless, blood pooled beneath him as life ebbed from his body. Outside, the castle stayed indifferent to the tragedy. Abruptly, black tendrils burst from Mikel's ruined body. His decapitated head floated unnaturally, strings of darkness binding him together. The body jerked upward, refusing to fall. The masked figure observed Mikel's body move with grim interest. Despite the destroyed heart, the broken skull, and torn muscles, he stayed active. The enemy acknowledged Mikel's persistence, noting his body had already exceeded its limits. Drawing closer, the enemy showed the truth, a curse born from their shared despair. The deeper the hopelessness, the stronger their twisted love grew. From that love, the curse flourished, entwining itself deeper into Mikel's soul. Mocking words echoed as the masked man neared. Mikel stood defiant, his eye burning with determination. Vines of the curse stabbed his face, warping flesh and bone. Agony rushed through him. Yet he held firm. Mikel stayed silent as the masked warrior condemned him. The arena stretched endlessly around them, empty and cold, calling him a demon for not answering. The figure stated judgment and demanded he leave the stage. With no hesitation, the armored enemy unleashed an explosive strike. Mikel's body, stabbed and torn, flew through the air. Shadowy tendrils writhed as the impact sent him crashing down. Power rushed into Mikel's mouth as the orb struck. His body convulsed under the force. Surprise spread across the battlefield as he endured the devastating blast. Despite this, something within him declined to shatter. Wounded yet not broken, Mikel charged forward and sank his teeth into the enemy's arm. Blood spilled immediately. The armored man looked down, surprised. Cracks spread across his helmet as Mikel's cursed energy rushed again. The enemy retaliated, lifting Mikel off the ground with massive force. Steel tendrils coiled around his body. Even in the air, Mikel didn't release his bite. The fight reached a brutal crescendo, both refusing to yield. The masked enemy tightened his grip, hoisting Mikel high. Writhing tendrils dug deep into his flesh. Despite the unbearable agony, Mikel screamed in defiance, refusing to surrender even as his body was restrained midair. A brutal slam followed, smashing Mikel against the floor. The enemy towered over him, calm yet merciless. With cold eyes, he wondered how long Mikel could withstand this torment. The sun's light barely reached them now, suspended from the ceiling. Mikel's body was stretched and coiled tightly. His suffering echoed through the chamber below. Rapunzel covered her eyes, unable to observe the pain unfold. Her scream stabbed the silence in despair. At that moment, something changed. Mikel's curse rushed again. Shadowy tendrils spiraled outward, shaking the room's foundations. Rapunzel looked on, trembling, her body bound by the same black vines. A mass landed heavily before Rapunzel. Blood marked the floor. Her wide eyes met Mikel's, barely conscious and broken. His name escaped her lips, filled with fear and grief. Her heart froze as he fell. 2 pieces of Mikel's body lay separated, his head and torso, both motionless on the floor. Rapunzel gazed at the sight. Frozen, bloody tendrils pulsed faintly from his neck, twitching weakly beside her trembling form. And haunting silence surrounded her as memories of a past failure returned. No vines extended his hand this time. Just like before, her fear took hold, locking her in place against the invisible weight of loss. Simone called to her, yet her mind was distant. Eyes opened wide as realization struck, agony overtaking her hesitation. Tears welled up uncontrollably. She turned towards the fallen Mikel. Unable to deny the truth she saw, Rapunzel crawled forward, inching closer across the bloody floor. Her hand outstretched, his hand, touching his severed head. Softly she repeated his name. Again and again. Mikel's fingers, detached yet weakly twitching, stayed just out of reach. She lifted him gently, brushing dirt and blood from his face. Arms closed around his broken body. Warmth pressed into her chest as she gripped him tightly. Seated in her ornate wheelchair, the noblewoman known as Ilia observed the fallen girl silently. Her expression showed no sympathy, just judgment. Steadily, she issued a command to the masked figure standing close by. A sharp response followed. The masked man turned to Cinderella, forcing her to observe what came next. Even as her hands shook, she was denied the opportunity to protect those she cared about. Clutching Mikel's broken body tightly, Rapunzel sat motionless in the center of the hall. Darkness started to close in. Her figure, small and silent, stayed frozen as shards of something unseen dropped around her. Outside the grand hall, Rapunzel sat alone. Arms coiled tightly around herself, cold air drifted through the windows as she waited. Behind her, Mikel neared quietly, observing the grief that clung to her like the snowfall outside. She gripped him tightly, burying his face in her shoulder. A tear dropped as she embraced Mikel, their warmth offering fleeting comfort in a moment shadowed by agony. Memories rushed back. Rapunzel remembered the tower, the warnings of the witch, and the safety she abandoned. Regret filled her. Had she stayed, perhaps tragedy could have been avoided. She saw his younger self waiting each day, hoping for her return. That hope, now tainted by consequences, a mutilated arm lay before her. Mikel fell, the result of a choice made long ago. She attempted to take the blame, yet Mikel's thoughts were clear. It was his error. In a distant memory, their hands met under the wood's canopy. He had defied warnings, leading her into the unknown. The moment was gentle, yet it had rewritten their lives forever. Rapunzel held Mikel close, her fingers gently cradling his face. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke with a trembling smile. Both of them had defied the adults, ignoring every warning. They were foolish, reckless, and yet... Mikel's tears stumbled quietly down his cheeks. Despite everything that happened, he found solace in one truth. Even if they had made mistakes, something good had come from it. Not all consequences were burdens. Looking into her eyes, he remembered the first time they met. That encounter, unexpected and unforgettable, had shifted the course of his life. Loving her had brought both suffering and joy, yet in his heart, it stayed the most beautiful choice he ever made. He recalled the days in the woods, lying in sunlight beside her. Even if cursed or wounded again, nothing could outweigh the worth of those times shared. Better to have known that happiness than to live in ignorance of it. Her voice cracked as she murmured his name. Mikel, tears fell openly now. She never wanted to forget. Seated in regal silence, the masked noblewoman observed the serpent speak. Despite its withered form, it stayed fixated on her. Through every collapse, its gaze never shifted. That loyalty unchanging showed what had genuinely endured, eyes wide with realization. She turned towards Mikel. Doubt not anymore clouded her heart, fingers trembling. Rapunzel extended his hand and pulled him close, holding his head gently as if anchoring them both to certainty. Tears welled as she smiled at him. Promises were not anymore spoken in fear, yet in belief. No matter what followed, she would remain by his side. Every moment forward they would face together. Surrounded by emptiness, they sat quietly in the center of the grand hall. Framing their embrace, ornate vines curled like closing curtains. Nothing else moved, just two figures in stillness, bound in shared determination. They stayed in that embrace, unmoving, unshaken. No more separation, no more hesitation. Whatever came after, their future was already chosen. Together, not for a moment, not for a day, yet always. Without end, Mikel's eyes opened wide as understanding settled in. In that silent darkness, he embraced everything. His voice rang weakly, calling her name with clarity, Rapunzel. Abruptly, cursed thorns burst from the floor, spiraling upward with violent force. The twisted energy rushed fiercely, threatening to consume everything in its path. Panic spread as the vines took shape around him. Reacting to his presence, Rapunzel stood firm, letting the chaos swirl around her. The thorns coiled tightly, yet she stayed unmoved. Gradually, the raging darkness started to contract. The once uncontrollable curse was being drawn into her, order forming from uncertainty. Onlookers gasped in alarm. Lafina screamed for the knight, Ilya to intervene. Urgency filled her voice, urging him to act before the transformation could complete. Yet hesitation kept him rooted. A massive impact struck as the curse centralized. Amid the thick nest of vines, just Mikel's eyes stayed visible. In that moment, his thoughts lingered on Rapunzel. Since the day they met, her presence had shaped everything: his agony, his determination, his love. He fundamentally different. A realization dawned. He eventually grasped what set them apart. It wasn't just power or status, it was purpose. The tower shook fiercely outside, petals scattered in the storm as the curse rooted itself deeper. Inside the hall, chaos spread, and the once pristine chandeliers broke, trailing debris like falling stars. Amid the swirling fragments, something invisible yet strong connected them. A silent thread, fragile, unseen, bound their lives together. It stretched between the darkness and light, never severed, never broken. Lafina stepped forward through the clouds of destruction. Her eyes opened wide, hand clutching the gem at her chest. What stood before her was not despair, yet a spark, a single light that cut through hopelessness. Below the towering presence, Mikel's body lay partially trapped, cursed vines wrapping tightly around his legs. Though bound and broken, his sacrifice stayed. He had not run. He had stayed because love had given him the strength to stand even in ruin. Mikel stood transformed, thorns coiled tightly around his limbs. Behind him, Rapunzel and Lafina observed in surprise. A radiant force rushed from his chest as the curse fiercely reacted, tearing upward in resistance. His opponent hesitated. Cracks formed across his mask as he identified the shift. Mikel's awakening was no illusion. It was rooted in truth.